Okay, in the interest of time, I'm just going to get started because we're recording the session, but I know that people will be still joining us as we go along. I'm very pleased to have Dr. Elena Riva today from the University of Warwick talking about student well-being in education. Elena is the head of department at the Institute for Advanced Teaching and Learning. She's associate professor, principal fellow of the Higher Education Academy, and she's a national teaching fellow as well. So we're very pleased to have her here today, and I'll just let you start your session.
Thank you. So, hello everyone. My name is Elena, and I'll try to share a presentation. I'm always frightened of technology, so please forgive me in advance if something goes wrong. That always happens to me, but hopefully not this time. I trust this time everything will be smooth. Thank you so much for your time. I'll try to stick to an hour. I know we're all usually super busy, so trying really to keep the time. If you have questions, I'll have sometimes at the end to really discuss kind of ideas together. But if there are some burning things that you want to share, please put your hand up, interrupt me anytime, anytime you like. Or if you prefer to pop in the chat, that is also absolutely fine for me. Melissa, maybe I'll ask you if I don't see the chat, if you can prompt me, because it is a bit awkward sometimes when you present. It's difficult to see the chat, so just heads up on that. So let's see if I can do it okay for once. Sort of slideshow from beginning. Can you see this? Yeah? Excellent.
Yes, I can.
That's brilliant. So today I'd just like to talk to you about my journey to try to think what does it mean embedding well-being in the curriculum in higher education. It has been a journey that I started about 7-8 years ago, purely out of my practice. So just seeing what probably a lot of us are seeing, a community that is really struggling from a well-being and mental health point of view, and just trying to think how, if it was possible for me to make a difference, or try to understand more together with students and members of the staff community, what it could be done to try to address what is a growing problem. So I thought to start just to clarify what is generally meant with the terms mental well-being. It can be quite difficult in the sector to pin down what we mean with well-being, what we mean with mental health, what we mean with mental well-being. There is quite a confusion around the terminology, and people might associate to these terms different ideas, different concepts. It is quite fair to say, and I always say to my students when I teach my module Understanding Wellbeing, that we have understanding of what mental health and well-being are, but if we be focusing on one definition only and taking that as the only possible definition, it is not what we're meant to do, because so many disciplines have an interest in try to understand even better what well-being and mental health are. Thus, I'm presenting here some definitions, but these are not exhaustive, and people use these terms in different ways. Mental well-being is the positive aspect of mental health. So it's more than of the absence of disease. It's more than just not feeling unwell. It is a positive side. It is on the other end of the spectrum, so to speak. So people with mental well-being feel good and function well. Some people call this positive mental health. Other people call it flourishing. So it is that positive side is the opposite end of the spectrum. And I took this definition from Professor Sarah Stewart Brown, which is really incredibly well known for developing what it is now the most utilized scale for measuring well-being, the Warwick Edinburgh mental well-being scale. And we're very lucky that she's still an emeritus professor here at Warwick, and I work with her closely. So mental well-being is influenced both by external circumstances and by how we respond to them. I think if we stop 1 second, we can all kind of, beyond, the words on the screen, we can kind of recall in our own experience what that means, and perhaps you're able to pin down to something that happened in your life, how these words can really have meaning in our experiences. Of course, external circumstances change all the time. So mental well-being also fluctuates from time to time. It's not something that is set in stone. We might throughout our life having a variety of experiences of mental health and mental well-being. And this is widely recognized in, of course, the academic community, but and what I always say to my students, also in personal experiences, which I think play an very important role, where we try to approach and discuss this concept with students and among ourselves as a community. It is recognized in mental well-being as a very powerful influence on physical well-being. And if we think about the university environment, also on learning and productivity and on the quality of interpersonal relationship. I think I'm not saying anything particularly new here. It's just to kind of get a baseline on which hopefully we can all find point of contact. And as I said, this is one way of looking, but there are, if you look in literature, is a constant debate around this terminology, and people utilize the word World Health Organization definitions, people might reject those. It is a very lively and conversation. So if you're interested, I recommend you to follow the debates, academic debates around this. What we know is that we have a real kind of situation around mental health and well-being, with a declining or reported declining mental health and well-being across the university community. Here there are some titles about students, but, and you will see in my presentation, the same can be said about staff. There's been quite a focus on students' mental health and well-being for obvious reasons. The title, the reported here, kind of give the kind of the scales also of the public opinion and the public interest in this topic. But we know that this complex reality affects the whole university community, and not only students, but also members of staff. Thus, if we really want to talk about mental health and well-being in higher education, we need to talk about the whole community. And it would be a deficit if a university only takes approaches to support students' well-being without really thinking about the well-being of staff. Because, of course, as we all know, we are one ecosystem, we are one community, and if one part of the ecosystem is suffering, that will affect the other parts as well. And there is plenty of research I'll go through that really shows that is very much true also in the teaching and learning environment. So just to give you some ideas and some kind of what we know about mental health in higher education. Research, this is a bit older research, but there is a flood of new data coming in the past few years, and of course, the pandemic has really heightened the interest around mental health, and the number of research studies that came out since 2020 is really remarkable, but they more or less confirm what the community was starting to really understand later on, prior to the pandemic. And we do understand that students with mental health difficulties are less likely to complete a course or a module, so affects on progression, is less likely to attain higher grades, and more likely to drop off of the university, so progression, complete, and attainment. And also, problematically, of course, is more likely to experience long-term consequences in terms of future employment, earning potential, and very importantly, overall health. As I said, all the data that are coming out now just reinforce, confirm, add more details to these kind of key points that we know are realities. But we also know that while learning has been shown to help mental well-being, so to achieve that stage of feeling well, functioning functioning in a good manner, university study and culture has also been shown to trigger mental health issues. So we have this complexity where the experience of the university can really affect students in a positive or in a negative manner. And thus, the university experience cannot be seen as a kind of a net neutral experience that people go through. And again, I think we all are fully aware of that. We probably don't need any more kind of me going on about it. It's not a neutral experience we go through. Parts of all the different parts and all the different implications of us entering in relation with an environment in which we all work and study does affect how we feel and how we function. So here are some data from the Office for Students in relation to the UK, but I've just completed a report for the European Commission around mental health and well-being in the states of the European Union, and we have a very similar situation in Europe as well. With similar data emerging across the different nations that put together form the European Union. So I've reported here some of the UK data. We have newer data as well that again confirm a trend, but this is not something that we only see in the UK, but is an international wider problem that does affect Anglo-Saxon universities in Australia and the US, for which we have quite a lot of pictures given by all the studies that have been undertaken in this sector, but it's also true in Europe, and we have emerging research also in other parts of the globe, such as Latin America, China, India, and Middle East, and so on. But here a snapshot of some of the data, and I'll share with you these slides. You can go through, you can read the report of the Office for Students, and if you Google Office for Students, there is a full page that really look at current data and current trends in mental health in higher education. These are worrying data, and as I said, here I'm talking about students, but there is plenty of information available that shows a growing trend among staff. And for staff, I mean both academic and people who work on administrative tasks and third space professionals. We do about this, this is all the kind of doom and gloom scenario. What can we do so that we can make a change? And I really came in from that perspective, and I bet that all of you here have this in mind or are interested in at least in thinking, okay, so we're all on the same boat. What shall we do? There is quite a lot of work, and I forgot to put the reference there, but I will add it. I invite you all to really have a look at the University Mental Health Chart, which is a chart that really look at what we know seems to work around well-being. Has been commissioned by Students' Minds together with a variety of universities that came together and really started to think about what is possible to do. And they created a comprehensive approach that can really support the different universities to start to think how to tackle this problem in a way that is not like dividing the problem in subsect and try to solve them disjointedly, but really think together about what can we do collectively in an organic, holistic manner to address this problem. Of course, students need support with mental health needs in a timely way. So all the work that has been done in terms of support, in terms of counselling services, in terms of well-being services that really look at support when issues arise. And as I said, this is true for staff as well. But also we need a culture that really starts to embed well-being in everything we do. So we start to think about what does it mean, thinking about creating a culture culture that that promotes well-being for all. So having a proactive approach that preempts issues instead of a reactive approach where we just prepare for when the fire is up, but really trying to preempt and really try to think about what can we do so that the culture and the way in which we interact with the university does not make us ill. And I think the curriculum and the teaching and learning environment can really play an incredible role in this proactive scenario that we really want to generate. And of course, we want to empower students so that they can really, and members of staff, of course, so that they can really build the skills and strategy that can support them throughout the journey at the university, which of course is full of ups and downs, which is absolutely natural. Is there will be anxiety, there will be stress, and that is all part of an experience that we have to we go through in our lives. And to a point, it is natural. Is when this becomes oppressive to a point that students kind of function, kind of feel well, or a member of staff kind of function, kind of feel well, is where this anxiety and stress, they are not anymore normal, natural element of life, but become something that can really, really affect our mental well-being and mental health. We also need to accept that higher education needs to change. We know that there are barriers in the ways in which the university has structures. There are cultures, toxic culture of performativity that sets people against each other, and metrics pressure. And we're all well familiar with a certain, with a very complex culture that derives from a neoliberal marketized universities in which we are living, that really affect our daily lives and affect the lives of members of staff and students. We often share, of course, decline in different ways, depending if we're studying or working. We're affected by a culture that it really hinges on performativity and really hinges of metrics and measuring in a way that is not always for conceiving to learning or working well, but it can be seen as more a policing type of scenario, I dare to say. And also, we need to recognize the students are different, the member of staff are different. We have a long way to go in terms of creating inclusive environments where there are not existing barriers, discriminatory barriers in terms of genders, and of course other protected characteristics that can really already create a stumbling block when we're talking about creating situation of well-being and mental health for all. Adapt our tuition, curricular learning environments, and I really want to stop and reflect with you all on this latter part, which is where majority of my work lies. But I really wanted to introduce it as part of a wider scenario. The work that we can do in curricula and learning environments is not disjointed from everything else. It has to be part of a whole university approach, holistic approach that really look at the whole university experience, support, preempt, but our culture, the discrimination that can happen, everything has to be really thought through if we really want to make a change in terms of well-being and mental health. And as I said, please do have a look at the University Mental Health Charter. It kind of breaks down everything I said and really dives into all these things I could only very, very briefly touch upon. I also would like to stress the importance of participatory practices. We understand that this type of approach that is integrated, holistic, that doesn't divide academics from services or the support from the learning environment is what we need to work towards, and also an approach that really looks at staff and students. But also we need to really think, how how can we involve our staff and students in really thinking about how to devise an all-university approach that works for our specific institution. The experts of well-being, students' well-being are students, the experts of staff well-being are staff. We have to make sure that there is space for people to be involved through participatory practices such as co-creation, or there is a massive umbrella from focus group to survey to real co-creation, develop new governances. We need to make sure that the voices of students and staff are considered and embedded. Otherwise, again, I think this won't work. And hopefully I will give you some example of that is possible in the learning environment. Here, just banging on something that I really kind of keep talking about. There is very little acknowledgement still in the UK, in Europe, and more widely about the interlinked relationship between staff and students' well-being. And often institutional intervention and approaches explicitly or implicitly prioritize students' well-being. This has to change because we're part of one ecosystem, we're part of one community, and we really need to know actions that we take to support students' well-being, how and if they negatively impact on staff well-being. And I might have an example from our own university when during COVID, in order to rightly support students to go through a very complex time, there was a change in policy around the extension that really ended up affecting teachers in a way that really affected, and we know from lived experiences of teachers that really affected an already difficult and complex situation and drove elements of anxiety and stress and incapability of meeting that line to a level that was really not acceptable. So in actions that were taken with the best intention to support students' well-being was not really thought through what the impact that could have on staff. And this all university approach is there to try to prevent this type of situation to happen. This is just a small example, but hopefully I've given you the taste of what I'm trying to say. So if we change admins systems, if we change certain approaches, we really need to think, what does it mean for the whole community, not only for some. So going back to maybe why I'm here today, but hopefully that was helpful, and I'm checking my phone to see what time is it. That was helpful to set some kind of general scenario. What do we know about the learning experience? Is it true that does affect the mental well-being? Of course it does. And we have plenty of research that really shows us what I was saying before, how also the experiences in the curriculum, so not only what happens outside the classroom, be that virtual, blended, or physical face-to-face, really affect students' well-being. We know students' well-being is integral to learning, so when we are well, we learn well. Again, nothing particularly, shocking here. Poor students' well-being, as I said, can impact academic achievement with consequences for continuation attainment. And students' well-being experience is impacted by the teaching and learning environment. And I put here some references that you can have a look at in one of my own studies. So how does teaching practices and the learning environment contribute to experiences of well-being? Well, we know that several aspects of the learning experience, from classroom culture to physical learning spaces, course design, assessment, model delivery, as I said before, they're not neutral, can have either a positive or negative impact on the health and well-being of students. And of course, that impacts on the level of stress. And as we said before, I'm not here to say that students should have a stress-free experience of university. That is unrealistic, and also is not what we're talking about. But we're talking about a level of stress that are manageable, that students can deal with, and they can push them to achieve where they want to arrive. Also, the learning environment affects the degree to which they feel connected to others. And we know from tons of literature that interpersonal relationships are absolutely crucial to our mental health and well-being. And what happens in those classrooms or in the virtual environment does impact the way in which students feel connected to others, their feelings of mattering and belonging, which are crucial for well-being. So we can work with that to try to think, how can we make sure that those spaces are conducive to connections to happen? Of course, it really impacts on the way in which they feel meaningfully engaged in the university experiences. And we do know from positive psychology and psychology more in general that, of course, mastery, ownership of learning and so on and so forth, engagement with what we're doing in our daily life play a massive impact on mental health and well-being. So we can really think, how can we support students within the learning experience that we plan, so that we can sustain their mental health and well-being. Here, I don't want to go into major details into here, because you can read all the work of Kate, Lisa, and as I said, there is a floods of reference at the end of this presentation that really talk about the barriers and the enablers of well-being, to mental well-being in the curriculum. And I really highlight this work of Kate from previously OU, now Arden, and she's an advanced HE advisor, and she really works a lot in this area. And she's done this study around distance learning, but a lot of what she found is really can be easily translated in a variety of different learning settings, including the face-to-face. And I recommend you to go and have a look at this paper. There is a nice kind of graphics that really shows how assessment, curriculum, tuition can really be enabler or barriers to well-being. As we were saying before, it can go one way or another. It's not neutral. But she also have a look at other aspects and other barriers and enablers to well-being for their overall experience. So she touches upon other elements, spaces, people that we were mentioning before. So this is a very interesting kind of paper to go and have a look at. And there is, I think, one of the seminal work from Bike in 2019, who ran massive studies in Australian universities and really set the tone for a lot of the research that came after, and really started to think about how the learning experience impacts on mental well-being. Like 2019, it will pop up as soon as you Google it. And this paper and a variety of other references I've embedded might give you more information on what I can do now. I just wanted to tell you what we've done at work and just give you some ideas, and then hopefully we'll have the time for you to think, what can you do, or even just recognize what you're already doing in your institution to really support well-being in the learning environment. One thing that we wanted to do at work was really try to think, okay, we recognize that we accept that the learning experiences, their role to play for supporting well-being. So what? How do we go about it? So one thing we wanted to do has been to co-create with students and with a large number of members of staff. We involved over 40 members of staff that were very generous to give their times and their experiences, to build a repository of practices that other members of staff can very easily embed in their own practices. And hopefully I'll be able to show you a little bit how that works. But there are ideas from simple icebreakers to how to write marking criteria, or how to present communication to students, that really have been discovered to be inclusive and supportive, and they could sustain the well-being of students. And you can even kind of select what you need. So I'm looking for an assessment, I'm looking for an icebreaker, I'm looking for group studies, I'm looking to set up a peer assessment activity, and also class size. So there are tips for very larger classes, 300 and above, to small seminars of 15. There are tips on how to embed these type of practices in the virtual environment, face-to-face, and so on. So I've written a paper with Kate about this, and I also wrote a couple, like a post for the Times in Higher Education, and there is a podcast in which I talk more in depth about this library. Now, I'm going to try to see if I can just show you a little bit this library very, very quickly without making a mess of it all. Let's have a look. If I can, what is it? I need to Google it again. I know it's here. So let me. Sorry, I did say that maybe I was going to make a mess of it all. Yes. So I hope you can see it. But so we created this repository of pedagogies, and of course there is the usual trying to set the rationale and so on. We divided our pedagogies in 4 categories because out of this of a study specific to work, we discovered some of the key issues or barriers that could support our students' well-being out of extensive focus groups with our students and staff members. So members of staff can search the practices according to these categories, or they can just explore and filter all pedagogies. It is a bit clunky because SciBuilder is not the best in allowing this type of repository to happen, but let's say if we want to create a student-centered environment, because students told us that when they are, challenged in a certain way and when their needs are at the center of the learning environment, they feel supported, recognized. They don't feel they're just a kind of a recognizable face in the midst of so many faces at the ever all, and the uniqueness is recognized. So, for example, you can check group activities, and there are a lot of ideas that people can look at, like, for example, negotiated curriculum. And very kindly, members of staff have shared their pedagogies with others in details, really saying exactly how it works, sometimes sharing their own marking criteria, sharing presentations, and so on and so forth. Each practice is tagged, so we have decided to have some kind of filtering, so you can filter according to condition for well-being, preparation time, third time, class size, resource type, class level, class type. So if you look at going through the old pedagogies, you can filter them through in this way. And I really want to highlight the importance of the fact that members of staff have shared practices that maybe took them, a few years to get around to prepare, and the generosity of these members of staff. So when you have to explore and filter pedagogies, for example, as I said, it's very clunky, but let's say someone wants to do something for first year and is teaching a lecture, and you don't have much time, so you want to filter and you just want all these things to, and you can filter through it. So this is an example of how we went about it, and I can show you other idea. For example, assessment. We know from literature that assessment represents an element. It can be a significant stressor for students, and as I said before, sometimes it's what it's supposed to be, but sometimes it creates, because of deadlines or staggering, not being staggered, or the format of the assessment, or so many kind of issues in relation to it, the misalignment of assessment with what they've learned in the classroom, the lack of preparation, the lack of formative assessment. Often assessment is seen as a trigger and an element of stressor. So there are some idea shared, again, very generously from several members of staff on how to make sure that such important, crucial, but also complex part of the student's journey can be kind of addressed when we preparing modules and when we create the learning experience in a way that can be more mindful of the well-being of students and staff. So again, you see a lot of people when about thinking about assessment, which is not surprisingly, because I think it's the experiences of many of us, of students really struggling around that and feedback. So it's unsurprisingly to a point that a lot of members of our staff really thought about it. And for example, self-assessment and again, how it works. And as I said, very kindly people donated their own practices. And interestingly, I did a study. So this library has been accessed by over 10,000 members of staff from Warwick and worldwide, and we ran an evaluation, and so many members of staff were saying, thank you so much, I can just use these things, I can't believe it, you know, and really highlighting how some of the burden of embedding this type of thoughts into their very practically into their daily learning experiences was taken away by this sharing. So how the physical and emotional burden of including, yet again, another thing to add to our curriculum was taken away. And that is the paper, this one at the bottom, Lister K. Riva, and you can read about the experiences of using, but also co-creating this slide. So now, how can I carry on? So am I sharing? Yes, but I don't know. Oh, yes. So up to now, I just very briefly talked about thinking about the learning environment as a combination of culture. And there are, if you go through the library, there are a lot of hints on how to create a more cohesive learning environment where students can feel at ease and they can connect with students from other cultural backgrounds or nationalities. So thinking about the culture, but also the practicalities of our curriculum. But there is another way to go about thinking about mental well-being in the curriculum, and is practically thinking how to embed mental health and well-being as a topic of studies for increasing students' mental health and well-being literacy. So we can go about it in two ways, really thinking about how we set the spaces, but also thinking how can we embed, how can increase the mental health and well-being literacy of our students so that they're equipped to really think about their own mental health and well-being, but also the mental health and well-being of the community more in general. So at Warwick, we also tried to tackle from that perspective and really tried to think how can we increase the well-being literacy of our students' community. So I started creating a module that's called Understanding Wellbeing Theory in Practice, Ayatolah's department where I work, where students learn about well-being from an interdisciplinary perspective. So it is a module for credits that contributes towards their degree. And it is an interdisciplinary module where students learn about what well-being is from the perspective of a variety of disciplines, the academic perspective of a variety of disciplines. So from psychology and life sciences to economics, but also thinking about the arts and the impact of some of the practices that we know can support well-being, such as physical activities or mindfulness or creative arts, without being prescriptive, of course, but helping students to really think about what well-being is and to learn how to evaluate the practices that are out there and claim to support well-being. Why do we do that? Because we know actually that health literacy impacts on knowledge, but is also a main predictor for health. And similar studies are really emerging, showing that the same counts for mental health. We have now quite a bank of research that shows that the same counts for mental health. So not only health specifically, but mental health. And we have studies in the university on students and staff showing that an increase in mental health literacy is a predictor for a more, more flourishing community of staff or students. And the same goes with wellbeing literacy. So I worked very closely with the students that were on my classroom module, and across 4 cohorts, they all said, oh, I wish I knew this before. I wish this could be available to everyone. What can we do? So we developed together, so I co-created with students an online module open to all, and this is not unique to Warwick. There are examples in Yale and Bristol. A variety of universities took this approach. What is different from us is that we're not only concentrating on the science of well-being, which often is what these modules are about, but we look at well-being more holistically, and we really think about the contribution of a variety of disciplines into that. And this is an overview of the online module that is not for credit for now, but is open access, is year accredited, and also so they can have it on their transcript. And is a very flexible module that we built with students that can guide them to really think about what well-being is from the point of view of a variety of discipline. And it also gives them an opportunity to reflect on a variety of activities and strategies that can embed in their daily lives and support the community to the wider community to undertake when thinking about well-being. They also, so the students really led on the topics to include in the module and wanted to get out of it. So there are changes between this module and the one in the classroom. They really wanted to focus on social media. We were already focusing on the idea of failure and how failure affects well-being. And the module is structured in 3 sections, the same 10 topics run through the 3 sections, but students can just go more and more in depth. So they take 10 sessions in the front, and then they go more and more in depth in the different disciplines, taking the different levels of the module. Students can start the module at any point during their career. They can be as quick as they like in completing it, even though we recommend them to take the time. There are a lot of reflective tasks embedded in the module. I hope to show you some of them. And so that is a super flexible module. It's podcast-based. Students with whom we co-created really wanted podcasts. I wanted videos. They just wouldn't just know. We wanted podcasts with the idea that students could listen to them whilst running or doing the washing up and before going to bed. They made a fantastic case for it. So we went with them and they recorded the podcast. We trained them so that they could record them. So the module is super student-led, and of course with the support and the training that the staff can provide. And the podcasts are conversation between a student and a disciplinary expert that comes from work, and when there was not expertise in the topic students wanted to cover from elsewhere, like in the case of economics of well-being, we have someone from Singapore, and then for social media, someone from London City. So the module was co-created. Up to now, 7,000 now Warwick students have taken the module, with over 1,000 students gaining here accreditation. We have wonderful feedback, and really they reiterate what students in the classroom were saying to us, the relevance of actually moving beyond the kind of sometimes airy-fairy messaging around well-being, and really diving into what well-being is from an academic perspective, and really reflect on strategies and supports and so on. So the module has been taken as it is from 3 UK universities, Glasgow School of Arts, Arden and Salford, and the University of Copenhagen wanted to really enhance the well-being literacy of the students as well, and saw this model. So we started a collaboration. The modules was relaunched both in classroom and online one, translated in Danish, rejigged of course for the Danish context, and it was launched in this academic year 2022-2023. And we're seeing the same kind of messages coming from Denmark and this other UK university, where students, feel truly supported in developing their understanding of well-being in that respect. These were the 2 examples I wanted to share with you, just to give you an idea of what we've been doing at Warwick to try to think about how to practically sustain and support well-being in the curriculum, both on a, within the environment and thinking about the experience overall, independently by the disciplines. A lot of the practices that are in the library can be applied to any discipline. They're not sub-specific, some they are, some are not. And then also thinking about how enhance well-being literacy of students. It's fair to say that we're now thinking about how can we do that for staff. So we're developing, a lot of members of staff contacted to us for a similar module, but for themselves. There are existing provision for staff in terms of apps, and they've been subsidized by the university, but they felt that, you know, they wanted that kind of academic support as well to try to think about well-being from a slightly different angle and increase their well-being literacy. And of course, has always been an element of co-creation with staff sharing practices that felt were not burdensome and were easy to embed. And as I said, the generosity of staff in sharing their own, you know, babies in a sense, when it comes down to learning experience, was incredibly well received. And this is just a drop in the ocean of a larger well-being strategy that Warwick is taking, that is whole university approach that tries to look at all the different aspects. So I just put here something here for you. We don't have to do it. We can just have a chat. But there are some kind of ideas, some questions that perhaps can help the conversation. And I wanted to say your curriculum, because, you know, we all teach in different situations and different disciplines. There are some prompts that I put there, but I like to come back on the screen. So maybe I copy and paste those in the chat, and so that I don't have to have these slides on the whole time. If I can do that, which probably not. I'll do that. I'll stop sharing and then I'll copy and paste in the chat. But I'm also happy to take questions, whatever think work for you. And I've got 10 minutes spare, so
yeah,
I almost did it as I wanted for once.
Well done.
For once.
Thank you. While you copy and paste the questions, does anyone in the audience have any questions, comments?
No. Sorry, I'm copying and pasting so I can see.
Okay. Well, people are thinking that. I just wanted to ask you how you managed to get all of those people to share, you know, how that started, you know, because I think a lot of good practice normally happens. It's just it tends to be siloed in different departments, and it's very difficult to get, you know, that collaboration and that sharing of resources across the institution. So
I started from a small network of people. So we have what is called the Warwick International Higher Education Academy, which is like a network of educators. And I just asked if I could create a space, which we called Wellbeing Learning Circle, where just 5 or 6 members of staff from different faculty came together. And this is, you know, 7 years ago, and we started to really think, how can we do this? How can we have, you know, momentum? And so between us, we started to do presentation across different faculties to really kind of raise awareness around mental health and well-being in the curriculum, which back then was not a thing. So now very much is everywhere, but back then it wasn't. So we got a lot of resistance that now people don't get anymore, which is good for them. And then out of masterclasses and really people started to find an interest in this, and we really harvested it. So we went a long way to make sure that their participation was minimal. So the students really supported us. They came up with a lot of ideas in ways in which they could gather information from members of staff, from chats on Teams, to just send them forms to fill. I've got all the material, so you can just copy and use it to gather practices. And members of staff, you know, we're all time poor, but having the opportunity to share in very different ways, so in writing very quickly, or just having a half an hour chat where the students were taking notes, writing for them, and then ask them if that reflected what they were saying, really enabled us to involve you know, still a relatively low number, because 40 people is not very many, but it's still, you know, a good number that allows us variety. So yes, and they were all very generous, always grateful. But the students were really, really good in thinking how. And actually, it was a very interesting experience, because students sometimes are not aware of the situation of staff and how staff is time poor and how it's complex, you know, to make those little changes in the curriculum, and, you know, that they're kind of sharing among staff and students really also changed the culture. So we always made sure that these master classes were joint, staff and students are really creative. So they help us to think way to reach staff in ways I didn't think about beyond the usual email.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a question in the chat. How does Warwick reconcile this tension you alluded to around staff and student well-being?
So personally, I think we're at the beginning of that. So at the moment, we've done a lot of work on students' well-being, and I was very much against it. So we have a well-being strategy, 2020-2024, that looked at students' well-being and workforce well-being strategy. And I've always been against it, because you miss the trick if you separate the two, of thinking that, you know, I solved this, I solved that, all will work. No, because it's a relationship. Often whatever you do for students impacts on staff. So we're now changing our approach, and our new strategy that is from 2024 ahead, we will have a joint strategy of staff and students, so that we are thinking cohesively about curriculum for both. We're thinking cohesively about support for both. So we're starting on that. At the moment, we work quite disjointly, and whilst it's good, a lot of things happen in terms of staff. So we have now some counselling for staff. We have now this app that's been created. We have a reporter support for staff. So activity that's been built in the past years to try to support both, even though there's always been quite light on students, yet now we're trying to bring together more these all-university approaches. There are issues, though, they are beyond work, and I think they take an higher education effort. You know, there are some changes, you know, precarity of contracts, you know, early career academics that have to work 3 jobs, pastoral care that is not recognized adequately. These are all fights that we need to fight as a collective, I think. Even though we have done a lot of progress in that at Warwick, so we have now you know, same esteem. We have research and teaching tracks for becoming professors, so in promotion, so that all the different roles in university are recognized in the same way. So even though we are a research-intensive university, we are, as a university, 5 years ago, took the decision of really recognize the incredibly labor of teachers and people in pastoral roles, and so that often those roles are not recognized, and in promotion, in appointments and so on and so forth, when we talk about, you know, high level. And so there is a lot of work in that respect. I think we're quite behind on gender in terms of a female. You know, there are specific issues that affect gendered issues that affect the workforce, and I think we will be working on that. We have a group that looks at research culture, and a subsect that look at the experiences of the Black community and the gendered community. So we're doing quite a lot of work to really try to think about how can we change our culture. But as I said, I think it has to be a communal effort as well. I don't think we can do it on our own.
It's just a comment, not a question, from Laura, I think. She says, I really like the explicit link between inclusive practice and well-being. Sometimes colleagues can feel that they are being asked to embed lots of different things, whereas they're actually very interrelated.
They totally are.
Yeah.
They totally are. And actually, often we see the good teaching, you know, the good teaching is, you know, inclusive and it supports well-being. So but if you read the Bike 2019, but a lot of things that you read in this paper, like, yeah, this is this is just quote unquote good teaching. And we know in good teaching there is a lot of effort into there, but it's not really nothing particularly revelatory. But I'm putting in here, and I hope you have 2 minutes to look at some of the ideas that are in here. You see that probably you're already doing many of it, and maybe sometimes without thinking, but they can really make a change. And in the list of practices, we have also evidence of impact. So it's not students saying, yeah, this made a difference. There are some ideas that are just genius, so simple in terms of communications. They're just genius ideas that some of the colleagues had that really made sure that students that learn in different ways could really felt inclusive. I want to say that we also develop specific repository for neurodiverse students, because was a need that really emerged within Warwick, and we have a specific subset to think about neurodiverse students. Yes, they're all taken from Warwick because we wanted something that was community driven, and we really wanted the community to come together. But my colleague Rebecca Upshur, and I'm posting this in here, has created Education for Mental Health Toolkit, has created a toolkit for advanced HE, which takes, and I'm posting it in here, which it's more general and as an example from a variety of universities. And we're now doing studies together to try to understand the impact of toolkits and who uses them and how they uses them. So please do explore the work of Rebecca. She's amazing. And she's done a lot of work in terms of really thinking about education for mental health in similar respects. But I have to say, going back, I would do it the same, because actually has created a real community, a real kind of joined, well cohesive. I don't know. There is something special when you create something as a institution community, and those links that you create, those chats are invaluable. So. So the app, app has been bought. So it's not an app that's been created by Warwick. I'll dig out the name. I can't remember it, and I'll post it in there. It's an app for staff, which is available to every member of staff. So including, for example, gardeners and cleaners, and so from the Vice Chancellor, so everybody who is on a staff contract at Warwick can access this app. And there is a 24-hour support included in that app for mental health, but also tips. And these apps are incredibly popular now. And I think if you Google mental health app, many will come up. But that one I think has been designed particularly for higher education. Sorry, I'm useless here, but I'll post it as soon as I'll dig up the name. But it's not developed at Warwick.
Thank you. I think there was just one more question, maybe the last one, just in terms of time. From Mabel, what were some of the things co-created with students that helped them with their well-being?
So I think the module has been phenomenal. So we involved about 20 students in co-creating the modules with us. And well, they learn a lot just creating the module, of course. And so there is a section, I think I wrote something for the Times in Higher Education, where Vicky very kindly, who was one of our co-creators, talked about her experience. And a lot of what they say is that co-creation gave them that voice, that sense of self-esteem, that sense of mastery and security that we do now really supports mental health and well-being. So I suggest you, if I may suggest something that you might find interesting. So there is a work from Emmanuel and Piper that really look at exactly what you were saying, and I've passed it in here. Really look at the value of co-creation in creating relevant mental health and well-being practices, but also the impact that has on students and staff. And if I may, I might put this one as well that you might find interesting, that has been put together by a personal hero of mine, which is Alison Cook-Sather, that really think about the role of co-creation. And here you got a selection of very interesting ways in which is co-creation for mental health and well-being, and gives you a lot of interesting idea on how students as partners, student co-creator can really help us to address faculty and health and well-being. And our module is in there, but there are 15, 20 or whatever other ideas. And I hope that will help you to dive into that question and find some answer beyond my very, very brief one.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Elena, for your presentation. Lots of lovely comments in the chat. We're recording the session, so we
super
can share,
kind.
Yeah, we can share the link later on. That's absolutely fine.
Just one thing I wanted to say is please do get in touch with me. And I really love to work across different institutions. Really, really love it. And getting to know more colleagues is what really gives me pleasure. So please do.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for joining us. And we hope to see you in the next one next month.
Definitely. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.